What's happening? Happy Friday to everybody watching and listening to this podcast. Hope you have a great weekend and a safe weekend. But before we get to that weekend, we got to talk about the Patriots. The draft is less than 3 weeks away, and a lot is going on with the Patriots today. A lot is going on between them and Drake Maye. Burt Breer yesterday tweeted out that Drake Maye would take his top 30 visit at Gillette Stadium today. So Drake Maye is about 15 minutes away from my apartment right now. I would like to welcome Drake Maye to New England, to Foxborough, to Gillette Stadium. How you doing, Drake? Hopefully you enjoy your time here. Now, some of these top 30 visits, we have to underline this. They're fugazi. It's part of the game. Teams trying to mislead other teams to believe that they're very interested in certain players when they're not. They have these top 30 visits to throw teams off the track. But when we talk about the Patriots and we talk about Drake Maye, we know that this is not a fugazi top 30 visit. This is a very necessary top 30 visit. It is a critical top 30 visit. We know the Patriots, they want a quarterback. They need a quarterback. They are searching for the face of the franchise for the next 10 to 15 years. We also know that Maye wants to be drafted in the top 3. The higher you get drafted, the more money you make. Drake Maye wants to be a top 3 pick. The Patriots want to use a top 3 pick on a quarterback. Marriage, right? So this specific top 30 visit on this specific Friday, it means an awful lot. This is not an illusion. This is not playing the game or trying to throw other people, other teams off. This is a legitimate top 30 visit from one of the best quarterback prospects in this year's draft. And some would tell you one of the very best quarterback prospects that we've seen in at least the last handful of years. I know Greg Bedard recently talked about this with me yesterday on the podcast that we do. You know, you look at the Bruce Feldman mock draft in The Athletic, and there's one quote in there from a coach saying that Drake Maye was the best college quarterback that they have faced since probably Trevor Lawrence. It might be as good as Trevor Lawrence. So we're talking about somebody who is a top-notch quarterback prospect. He's in town. And this visit is huge. It's huge. This is the final time the Patriots will get to meet and talk to in person Drake Maye. This is the chance to walk him around the facility. This is the chance for him to sit down with Alex Van Pelt and Ben McAdoo and T.C. McCartney and Gerard Mayo, Elliott Wolf, Alonzo Highsmith, the owners. Burt Breer said last night on NBC Sports Boston that they were scheduled to go out to a dinner last night with the brass. This is the last chance you get in person because you can have some Zooms and all of that. But this is the last chance in person to sit down with a guy that you might make the face of your franchise for the next 15 years. To see how he interacts with guys that are in the building. How does he interact with possible future teammates? The final in-person feel and vibe from the guy that you have to trust. Because no matter who you pick at 3, if it's going to be a quarterback, you are handing that young man the keys. You are telling that human being you are responsible for this organization for the next decade plus. It's big. It's huge. Nothing more important in sports than getting the right quarterback. So this is a pivotal day. It is a huge day for both the Patriots and Maye. Before I go on, I would like to remind all of you to give us that like, give us a thumbs up early on. Like to build those numbers, build this community, expand our reach as we get closer to the draft. So don't forget, take a second of your day. It's a Friday. We feel good, right? It's a Friday. Take a second. Give us that thumbs up on YouTube to beat that algorithm. And also don't forget to subscribe. We're about 120 subscriptions away from our 3,000 goal that we wanted to hit by Monday. So give us that like and subscribe to the podcast. Sitting down with Drake Maye today, the Patriots have to figure out, is this guy going to be truly a leader? Now, we heard all the scuttlebutt, as they say, coming from the combine that Maye had really impressed the Patriots. He won over the room. Well, let's see if he can do it again. Is he consistent? When he sits down, he talks to you, he looks into your eyes. Do you believe, if you're Mayo, that Maye is a leader? He's a leader of men. He's a young guy. 21 years old. Do you believe this 21-year-old can walk into a locker room with a bunch of guys that are older than him and truly lead that room? That's one of the biggest questions when you're searching for your quarterback. When you're looking at drafting a QB, especially in the top 3, you've got to ask yourself the question, is this guy a leader of men? Today, with this top 30 visit, Drake Maye has another opportunity to answer that question. Either a yes or a no. What's his attitude? How's he approaching things? Does he rub people the wrong way or the right way when he's walking through the facility? And of course, we know this is a job interview. In May, he understands it's a job interview. And hopefully, when you go on job interviews, you act accordingly, right? You understand what might happen if you fail in that interview. And you understand if you pass that interview with flying colors. So, of course, Maye is going to be on his quote-unquote best behavior. But you do get a feel by asking him certain questions, imposing certain challenges towards him, and having him, have conversations with certain people in the building. Is he a leader? What kind of attitude does he possess? How about the compete level, as they say in hockey? Does he have a high compete level? You got to get to know that answer as well. You got to get to know what makes him tick. Drafting a quarterback is so difficult, and that's why you see so many misses in the first round, but then you see some hits in later rounds. That's why somebody like Patrick Mahomes gets drafted 10th. Lamar Jackson gets drafted 32nd. Brock Purdy is Mr. Irrelevant. You have to put all the pieces together when you're drafting a quarterback. The Patriots are gathering as much intel, as much information as possible about Jaden Daniels, Maye, and of course, J.J. McCarthy to go along with Bo Nix and maybe even Michael Penix. But we have to acknowledge how difficult of a task this is. And that's why it's not easy. And the numbers tell you it's not easy. There is such a long laundry list of things that you have to ask about a quarterback before you feel comfortable in drafting that guy, if you're doing it the right way. There are so many boxes that young man has to check before you make that decision to draft him. You got to talk about leadership. You've got to talk about attitude. You've got to talk about approach. You've got to talk about mentality. You've got to talk about on-field traits. You've got to talk about how they face adversity. Football intelligence, mechanics, athleticism now in 2024. I mean, the list is so damn long. It's tough for me to name everything on the list. It's almost impossible. Is he a good teammate? All of those things. So that's why it's highly, 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 highly unlikely that you are going to hit on the quarterback every time you draft one. It's pretty much impossible. It's impossible to hit on everything, but I'm talking about in the first round because there's so many things you got to check off, man. It's so difficult to find that guy. So, the compete level, the attitude, is he a leader? The maturity, because he's 21 years old. What is the level of maturity that Maye shows during this meeting today? Does he act like the adult in the room? Does he give off the vibe that he might not just be ready yet? So that's part of the conversation. There's a lot more of the conversation that we have to talk about. Drake Maye in Gillette Stadium at Foxborough right now, hanging out with the Patriots, his top 30 visit. And I don't think it's a leap to say that April 5th, 2024 could decide the future of the New England Patriots. Because this is that next step. And many would tell you it could be the most pivotal step in this process to decide yes or no on this guy if he's sitting there at 3. So this could be the most pivotal day when we look back 5 years from now, 8 years from now, 10 years from now. If they do end up picking Maye and he works out and he passes the NFL test with flying colors, we will look back on this day, April 5th, and say, they made the right call. They made the right call. All right, a lot more to talk about. I want to talk about what else Drake Maye will be doing with the coaching staff today in Foxborough. But first, let's go to Pete. Pete sends a super chat. Per the state of the offensive line discussion yesterday, if the O-line's worse than last year, do we play our number 3 drafted quarterback, our golden goose behind it? It's a good question. It's a good question. If the offensive line is ill prepared to protect the quarterback, I would slow play the quarterback. And I understand. Number 3 pick, a lot of people want to play that guy right away. If you draft somebody at 3, you got to play him day 1. I say you play him when he's ready, and I say you play him when you feel like your offensive line is ready. What I don't want is to start any of these quarterbacks week 1 when they're a sitting duck in the pocket. So if they don't improve the offensive line through the draft, which I think they will, but if they don't, and we're looking at Chuck Okorafor, left tackle, Antonio Mafi, Leverett on the left side at left guard, David Andrews, Sidy So, and Owenu, I think you're okay from center towards the right. I think you're okay with Andrews, So, and Owenu. The big questions are the left side, obviously. Tackle and guard with Cole Strange, we don't know how healthy he's going to be at the beginning of camp. So on paper, it certainly seems like an offensive line right now that you do not want a rookie quarterback standing behind. Hopefully he's not sitting behind too often. You don't want him behind that left side of the O-line right now. But we have to see what happens in the draft. We have to see if there's a free agent signing after the draft for a bridge left tackle. We've got to see if there's a trade made before, during, or after the draft to see if they address the offensive line as well. Somebody like possibly Conklin out there in Cleveland. Do they do something to address the issue on the left side? That's the first question. And then we got to see how it works out. Look, I'm not a football expert, I'm not breaking down the all 22 of Chuck Okorafor and telling you that he's going to be an absolute failure on the left side if that's what they're going to do with him. I don't like the idea of playing him on the left side because he's only played 2 snaps the NFL level at left tackle, and the Steelers obviously felt like he was not a left tackle, he was a right tackle. But let's see. Scott Peters, Robert Kugler, both guys, offensive line coaches, they are very well respected. So who knows? We get into camp, we get into the preseason, and maybe Okorafor is surprising all of us by holding his own water. Maybe Cole Strange is ready by camp. So there's still a lot of unknowns. But right now on paper, if this is what you roll into the season with, if you're telling me it's going to be Okorafor, Mafi on the left side, then I would think twice about starting that quarterback right away, Pete. I appreciate the super chat. You can send your super chat to get your comment or question to the front of the line. All right, I want to get into what else Drake Maye is going to do during this top 30 visit today, and maybe some of the most important stuff that he's going to do will actually be something he does with the offensive coaching staff and how they're going to approach this day, what they're going to ask from Maye, what he might have to do during this visit. Before we get to that, the Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. Warzone has 9 maps on 30-plus acres of land. We're talking multiple villages, a trench warfare map, and hilltop forts. They've got paintball. They've got airsoft. They've got versions for the kids of paintball and airsoft, something for every age group starting at 6+. You can show up with jeans, good shoes, long sleeve shirt. They take care of the rest. Low key, casual, 4.9 star rating online. Fantastic staff. Check out Warzone Paintball and Airsoft in North Kingston, Rhode Island. Weather gets a little bit warmer. Want to do something different with the friends or the family? Check them out. Give them a call at 401-228-6366, 401-228-6366. Tell them the Nick Cattle Show sent you. All right. So Drake Maye in Gillette's facility right now, talking to the coaches. And we discussed the interviews he's going to go through, the in-person meetings, the dinner that reportedly he was going to go to last night with the team's brass. And then we get to football. And this is another important step in the process, is how he handles the football conversations in that facility today. They will review film. They will look back at some of his best. They will look back at some of his worst. They will show him film from the Cleveland Browns. Alex Van Pelt, what he wants to do offensively. They will go through that film. They will ask him questions. What does he see? What would he do in that certain situation or scenario? What went wrong on this play? What went right on another play? They'll get him on the whiteboard. He'll be drawing up plays. They might have asked him about a certain play last night. They might have given him a play call last night that he's asked to call back in the middle of the day today and draw it up on the whiteboard and explain what has to happen during that play to make it a successful play. So there's going to be whiteboard work. There's going to be a look at the playbook and get Drake Maye's read on what he could do best, what he might not do best. What is the young man's football IQ? Is it through the roof, or does he have a lot to learn? Does he understand what he sees in front of him? How is his processing? All of those things will be discussed today during this visit. It's a big visit, huge visit. How does Drake Maye fit within Alex Van Pelt's scheme? From the outside looking in, I think Maye fits brilliantly with Van Pelt. Maye does a good job throwing to the middle of the football field. The West Coast offense, Van Pelt, they will throw the ball an awful lot in the middle of the field. Maye is good in the middle. Michael Penix, not so much. Jaden Daniels, not so much. Drake Maye, yes. Attack the seams, attack the middle of the field. Anticipatory throws. He does that well. So, how does Maye fit the scheme? Outside looking in, looks like he fits it well. He can throw the ball on the move with those bootleg actions they like to run. And he will be asked to address his weaknesses. Drake, why did you miss this throw? Drake, why did you not see this? You can go back to the NC State game, for example. Last season for UNC, Maye missed a number of throws. Drake, what happened here? What went wrong? What did you miss? What would you do over again? What did you learn from this play? All of those questions will be asked of him today. We've got more on Maye. First, jump to a super chat. And I remind you, don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe. Just take a second out of your Friday as you're kicking back, maybe dreaming of Drake Maye being a New England Patriot, hoping, praying, crossing your fingers that Drake Maye is the next guy. While you do that, open your eyes for a split second, go down to that thumb on YouTube and click that thumbs up for us. It would be much appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe. Vitalik, Super Chat, $20 Super Chat. Man, oh man, I appreciate you. Off topic. Are we underestimating the loss of Bill Belichick on defense? Will we still remove what the other team does best like B did? Was he a non-factor in last year's schemes and whatnot? Long message, but appreciate you, Nick. Appreciate you, Vitalik. I actually wrote about this, I think it was last week, in my Boston Sports Journal column. And I touched on it a little bit during this podcast earlier in the week. Elliott Wolf is putting a lot of trust and belief in Gerard Mayo and DeMarcus Covington. Bill Belichick is a defensive genius. Steve Belichick did a really good job calling the plays the last several years. Both of those guys obviously no longer here. And I think it is a fair question to ask. And I'm not going to take it for granted. Belichick still had his hand in the defensive mix. There's no doubt. And we might sit here and I think justifiably criticize Belichick, the roster on the offensive side that he built, how he handled the quarterback and all of those things, but we cannot question the man's acumen and we cannot question the man's ability to understand what offenses do well and how to eliminate that. The hope is, and all we can do is go off of hope, Vitalics, because we haven't seen it yet. The hope is that both Mayo and Covington learned from Bill, learned from Steve, and they will take the reins and do a really good job. They feel like they have enough talent defensively. They've pretty much run it back, aside from Taki replacing Mac Wilson. So they feel like they've got the horses in that locker room to be a top 10 DVOA defense like they were last year. Puts a lot of pressure on the coaches. So I do think, we've been so focused on the offense, and rightfully so because it was so bad last year. We've been so focused on the offense, so focused on the quarterback, we have not talked nearly enough about Belichick's absence from the defensive room. And we got to hope. We got to hope that Mayo and Covington have it figured out. We won't know until we see this thing play out during the season. And Mayo, obviously, first-time head coach. There's a lot of things on that sideline that he's going to be handling. Am I confident? No, I'm not confident that they will, coach the defense as well without the Belichicks. Brian is obviously still here, but without Steve and Bill, I don't know how anybody could be confident. Am I hopeful? Yes. Do I think the defense will be good? I think the defense will be good. They get Gonzalez back. Judon comes back. I think they will be good. But ultimately, we don't know. Nothing is a sure thing. Nothing is a sure thing with any of this coaching staff. This is what happens when you turn over the coaching staff, right? It's what's happening in every place with a new head coach. You don't know what you don't know. Now, I think that Covington is ready. From what I've read, I believe he's ready. And I think they have enough talent defensively with, Barmore and Gonzalez and Judon. I think you have 3 top-tier talents at 3 critical positions. Edge, right? Interior defensive line nowadays with the pass rush in the middle and cornerback 1. I think you have some high-tier talent in those 3 spots specifically. But we don't know. We don't know. I think they'll be good. And if they're not good defensively, then that is, that's the Las Vegas April 5th over-under 4.5 wins. Because they have to hang their hat on the defense. No matter what they do with the draft. Even if they trade for T. Higgins and draft Drake Maye, they still are going to have to depend on their defense, especially early. So it's a fair question. Great question. Thank you for the super chat. Another thing the Patriots have to figure out during this Drake Maye visit today, is he a culture fit? Does he feel like he's a guy that fits with what you want? We've heard Mayo and Wolf talk an awful lot about culture. Do they feel like Maye fits the culture? And I would really want to know what Maye has to say about his 2023. Because nobody would look back at his 2022 film and have many questions. I mean, he was outstanding in 2022. You go back to 2022, the conversation was whether or not Maye was going to be the number 1 quarterback in this draft. Many people would tell you that he had a chance to surpass Caleb Williams. If he had as good or a better year this year than he had in 2022, we might be talking about Drake Maye and the Chicago Bears. So I would love to know what Maye has to say about last season. Does he blame it on other things? Does he blame it on the coaching staff? Does he blame it on lack of support? How much accountability does he take for his mistakes and not having as good of a season as many thought that he would have? So I would really dive into last year's film, his mindset, and what went wrong. What went wrong for you last year, Drake? I want that answer. Like, subscribe, rate, and review. Spotify, Apple Pods. We are popping there as well. And if you listen on Spotify or Apple Pods, matriculate on over for a second to YouTube, even if it's video on demand, and just click that like button. All right, so Jaden Daniels is visiting on Monday. We'll talk more about Daniels on Monday, but we still have more on Maye. So Adam Schefter was on his podcast yesterday, and this made the rounds. I don't know how many of you saw this or heard about this, but Schefter was on his podcast, and here's what he had to say about Daniels and Maye coming up in the draft. Quote, "It's hard for me today to see Jaden Daniels sliding much past pick number 2. So let's pencil him in there. And I know we're not supposed to reveal picks in advance. We don't know what the picks will be. But again, we'll see how this shakes out. I think that's how it's stacking up a few weeks out. Caleb Williams 1, Daniels 2, and then the Patriots would be on the clock at number 3 with the possibility of taking Drake Maye at number 3 in New England." That's Adam Schefter on his podcast. The number one thing I want to discuss when we look at Adam Schefter and what he said on his podcast, we have to acknowledge the difference between Schefter on his podcast and Schefter reporting something. And I think this is a major issue. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because many of you, your eyes might glaze over. But I think a major issue in the media world right now is that you have insiders, legitimate credible insiders also acting as opinionists and podcast hosts. And so when you start to blur those lines, I think it starts to confuse people. Was Adam Schefter reporting anything on his podcast? Was he reporting anything when he said what he said? Or was he just pontificating and opining as a podcast host? I think a lot of people see a Schefter comment and they say, Adam Schefter is reporting this. This is what's going to happen because of those blurred lines. I did not read what Schefter said on his podcast as a report. I read that as an opinion. There are a lot of qualifying words in that quote I just gave you from Schefter, right? Talking about Daniels and Maye. Pencil him in. When you say pencil him in, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen, right? I would pencil that in right now. Now, if you said write that down with a Sharpie, it'd be a little bit more consequential. Pencil it in to me, qualifier. We don't know what the picks will be. Huge qualifier. Schefter just told us we don't know what the picks are going to be. Schefter also said, I think. When somebody says, I think, that's not a report. A report is sources tell me what I've been told. That's a report. When you say, I think, you're telling the world that it is your opinion. It is not your professional insider report on the draft. Schefter also said, we'll see. We'll see what happens. So I did not take the Adam Schefter, Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels, Patriots at 3. I did not take what he said on his podcast as a report at all. I thought that was an opinion that the podcast host, Adam Schefter, was sharing. And I understand blurred lines, it causes confusion, and it's not fair to some people. But that's how I read it. And by the way, it's not the first time we have seen or heard something like this from Schefter. And it would not be the first time that he was wrong. I have 2 examples for you. Let's have some fun. So back in April of 2021, almost to the day, April 6th, so pretty much 3 years ago to the day, Schefter was on the radio show in New York, DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg. And here's what Schefter had to say about Mac Jones and the 49ers. Again, this was April 6, 2021. Quote, it'll be Mac Jones. I believe that in the end, they will pick Mac Jones at 3. That'll be the pick, and they will keep Jimmy Garoppolo this year. As we know, Mac Jones was certainly not the pick at 3 by the San Francisco 49ers. Now, in fairness to Schefter, the 49ers reportedly shifted last minute. Kyle Shanahan wanted Jones. Other people in the organization wanted Trey Lance, including Adam Peters, who's now in Washington, which is why some people believe that the Commanders will draft Jaden Daniels because he's more Trey Lance, obviously, than he is Mac Jones. So, in fairness to Schefter, reportedly there was a late shift within that organization. But it's obvious Mac was not drafted by the Niners. An even more recent example. So you go back to last year, April 17th, Adam Schefter is on NFL Live, ESPN. Here's what Bleacher Report wrote about Schefter's appearance that day. The Colts might have a number of quarterbacks to choose from with the number 4 overall pick of the 2023 NFL Draft. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported on NFL Live that the Colts may get to pick from C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis with only Alabama's Bryce Young off the board. Here's what Schefter said on that day, again, April 17th of last year. Quote, I think Indianapolis thinks, I think, there's a real chance right now that they can sit right where they are at 4 and get potentially the second quarterback in this draft. There's a chance we might not see a quarterback go at 2 or even 3, and there might not be a team that trades up because the value in that isn't what we thought it would be. Again, that is an opinion. Think about how many qualifiers in that one quote from Schefter I just gave you. There's a chance we might not see. There might not be. And as we know, C.J. Stroud went to Houston at number 2. So Schefter's thoughts, he was wrong. So he was wrong in 21. He was wrong last year. So just because Adam Schefter goes onto his podcast and says he thinks Daniels is going to go number 2 and Maye will be sitting there for the Patriots, certainly doesn't make it something that is bound to happen. He's been wrong before. He'll be wrong again. Difference between report and opinion. What I think is nobody knows. Nobody knows with certainty outside of the number 1 pick. I don't think anybody outside of the Washington Commanders facility knows what's going to happen, and I don't even know if Washington knows just yet. Nobody has a clue. Daniels going 2 would not surprise me. Maye going 2 would not surprise me. I'm not believing the McCarthy stuff. As we talked about, I think that's Jim Harbaugh pumping the tires. Pumping, trying to get a better player at 5 with the Chargers. But nobody knows. We have to remember, even the best insiders, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, Dan Graziano, even the best insiders, they talk to agents. They talk to people that have an agenda. Every single person you talk to, because you're trying to figure out and get information, every single person that you have a conversation with, they have an agenda. So if Schefter is talking to Washington, they might tell him something, leak him something that betters their position. The Patriots could sit there and say, oh, we love all of the quarterbacks because they want to make number 3 look even more valuable to get an even bigger haul. Right? So every single person that an insider talks to has some kind of agenda, especially this time of year as we're getting closer to the draft. I mean, there are top 30 visits happening right now. As we talked about, Drake Maye right now is sitting at Gillette Stadium. There's still a lot of info and intel that these teams are gathering. Now, are they closer today on April 5th about who they like, love, who they want to pick? Of course they are. They're closer. Have they run through the tape? Not yet. The Patriots, they're in a position right now where they have to compare Maye and Daniels. They've got Maye coming in today. They've got Daniels coming in on Monday. Until they meet with Daniels on Monday and put him through the same kind of situation they're putting Maye in through right now, they don't know. What happens if Maye falls on his face today? They could walk out of this top 30 visit saying to themselves, that's not the guy who we thought he was at the combine. Something he says, something he does might give them hesitancy. What if on Monday they put Daniels through the ringer and Daniels ends up passing with flying colors? They might walk out of the meeting on Monday and say, damn, Jaden Daniels, he was much more ready for this challenge than we thought he was going to be. He checked more boxes than we thought he was going to check. So they're still gathering information, valuable information. And I would also say this. These things might be true right now. It might be a truth that the Commanders are leaning towards Jaden Daniels at 2. It might be truth that if the draft was tonight, the Commanders would take Daniels. Doesn't mean that can't change. Things change. Things are fluid. You find out more information. So, what we hear today doesn't mean it's going to happen in 3 weeks, but it also doesn't mean what we're hearing today is necessarily the wrong information because it's still somewhat early in the process. All right, I'm going to get more to the draft because I want to take a look at Pro Football Focus's top 5 at wide receiver, quarterback, and tackle. Okay, so we're going to look at Pro Football Focus's top 5 at the 3 most pivotal positions offensively that the Patriots are looking at. We'll do that in a minute. First, I remind you, give us that thumbs up. More likes means more eyeballs. We try to build this community. Help us do that. Support us by liking and subscribing. I don't know if we're going to hit our goal of 3,000 subscriptions by Monday. Don't feel good about it. We're about $120 away. Give us that like. Subscribe while you're here if you like the content. Also, rate and review Apple Pods, Spotify, and the Patreon page. Exclusive content there. Mailbag dropping at noon today. All sorts of stuff in the mailbag this week at the Patreon. Talking WrestleMania, talking WEEI versus 98.5. All sorts of stuff in there. So Patreon page, $5 a month, $1.25 a week. Check it out. Patreon.com/Nick Cattle, Cattles. Brian Moniz. My guy Moniz sends in a super chat, $5 super chat. I appreciate you, Brian. I strongly believe Maye's performance slipped in 23 because he lost Josh Downs. Maye missed that security blanket and will need one here. I think that's part of the story, no doubt, Brian. You know, when I look at Drake Maye, I ask myself the question, the 2023 season, were there reasons? Were there reasons why Drake Maye wasn't the same guy in 2023 than he was in 2022? Are there explanations, and are these things fixable? It is my opinion. That's all it is. It's all I got. It's my opinion that many of the things that we saw from Maye in 2023 had to do with new offensive scheme, new drop back footwork that he was working on, and the lack of support around him. Tez Walker was his best receiver. He had to wait a few weeks because the NCAA dragged their feet with eligibility with Tez, at first saying he was not going to be eligible, and then circling back and allowing him to play. He lost Josh Downs, as you said. The offensive line wasn't great. If you watch Drake Maye's film, if you watch a number of his throws, there are a number of throws where the dude's dropping dimes and his receivers are dropping the football. There's a bunch of them. And so I always push back when people say, these are the numbers. Well, yeah, those are the numbers. But what happened, or what would have happened, if his receivers did a better job of catching the football? What would his stats look like at that point? Now, it doesn't explain everything. The elongated mechanics at times, the times that he had a clean pocket and misfired. He missed a lot of easy throws underneath. Those things need to be fixed. So I wouldn't excuse everything that we saw last year, but I do think there's a lot that we saw last year from Drake Maye on the field that could be explained by the circumstances he was dealing with. And some might say, oh, those are excuses. I think there is a clear difference between excuses and reasons. And I think some of those things that impacted Drake Maye's effectiveness last year, those are reasons and not excuses. Thanks for the $5 super chat, Brian. Again, you can jump in with your super chat, with your question, your comment. A lot of comments fly during the chat when we're doing these shows. So if you want me to see something, that's the best way to get me to see it. All right, let's run through before we bid you adieu so we can all enjoy our weekend. Because make no mistake about it, when this podcast ends, I've got 3 priorities this weekend. Okay? Those 3 priorities: craft beer, Chinese food, WrestleMania. Priorities. So when I say goodbye, those are my priorities this weekend: craft beer, Chinese food, WrestleMania. All right, Pro Football Focus. Top 5. What are they saying? Top 5 quarterbacks. Pro Football Focus. Here we go. Number 5. Let's start with 5. I like that. Number 5. Number 5 is Bo Nix, Oregon. So they have Nix rated over Michael Penix. Number 4, J.J. McCarthy. Number 3, Jaden Daniels. Your number 2 quarterback, according to Pro Football Focus, Drake Maye. Now, the question I have with Maye, how many drafts outside of this one, how many drafts would have Drake Maye as 1.1? What I mean by that is first pick, first round. If Drake Maye was in the draft next year, could easily see him be the number 1 quarterback selected. Last year, coming off of that 2022 season, he might have been drafted number 1. Obviously, CJ Stroud's a beast. But coming off of that 2022 season, Could have been number one. So Drake Maye is number 2, according to Pro Football Focus. Number 1 is Caleb Williams. So your top 5 quarterbacks, Pro Football Focus: Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix. How about wide receivers? We'll get to wide receivers in a minute. First, another super chat. JB Brown, your Patreon pod. Yes, so the Patreon page, I do an exclusive podcast every Wednesday for the members. And this past week, we dove into Bo Nix and a bunch of PFF analytics and talked about his fit within the offense. So there are a lot of things that we don't get to touch during this podcast, Monday through Friday, that I get to talk about on that Patreon page. So if you want to check those kinds of things out, get even more information, you can check out the Patreon page. Bo Nix has me thinking could be a good option if they trade down. Is there a franchise left tackle who would still be there at 11 in the Minnesota scenario? Wouldn't hate left tackle in Nix. So if you move down with Minnesota, let's also not forget, JB, that you could be getting 23 as well. You'd be looking at 11 and 23 in the first round this year. Are there premier left tackles there at 11? There are going to be very good prospects at 11. Joe Alt is likely gone, but you could have Fa'utanu there. You could have Fuaga there. You could have Fashino there. At 11, I think you have a really good chance of landing a top 3 left tackle in this draft. So if you don't love the quarterback and you're moving down to 11, that's what I would do. I would draft a tackle at 11. 100%, that's what I would do. I would draft a tackle at 11. I would draft a receiver at 23. That's what my plan would be. So, yeah, you've got some really good talent, some really exciting left tackle talent in this draft. The issue, and we'll talk about this, I think, more next week. The issue is, I think there's about 6 or 7 left tackles in this draft that you could say that guy could start day one. Very, very, very unlikely that any of those 6 or 7 guys will still be there at 34. And it goes back to the mock draft I did a couple of months ago. You know, the mock draft I did was Drake Maye at 3. Then I moved back into the late first round to draft Amarius Mims. You might have to move up in the top 20 to get Amarius Mims now. Of course, we don't know how the board is going to fall. We don't know who's going to draft who. But if you look at team needs, there are a lot of teams in this draft that need tackle play. Tackle play across the league is bad. It's not good at all. Offensive line play across the NFL is not good at all. Really. It's getting worse and worse. Every year it gets worse. And it's because of college offenses, what they run, what they ask their offensive line to do. The days of dominant offensive lines, there are only maybe a couple nowadays, if you're lucky. So there are a lot of teams. I mean, if you run through the draft needs, which is something else we'll do, we're going to pound the draft over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to do it differently. It's not going to be the same conversation of what to do at 3, okay? We're going to do some different stuff. But, you know, if you look at needs, a ton of teams. You could argue the Chiefs need a tackle. The Cowboys need a tackle. Up higher in the draft, Jim Harbaugh loves trench play, offensive line play. You could easily see the Chargers draft a tackle at 5. Or if they move down, they could draft a tackle. The Tennessee Titans need a tackle. There are just a number of teams that need a tackle. So if you wait until 34, you're going to wait too long. I think you will see a bunch of those tackles come off the board. And so that's the problem. You know, the issue is the Patriots are trying to address 3 critical needs in the same draft. That's why I think, if you ask me, it's much more likely that the Patriots will address 2 of the 3 critical needs in this draft, and they will either have to kick the can down the road on the 3rd critical need, or they will make some kind of trade, whether it's during the draft or after the draft, to acquire somebody to fill that 3rd need. Thanks, JB. Ryan says WrestleMania, indeed, fired up about it. Cody, he's going to finish the story. He's going to finish the story. Here's my prediction. Cody gets pinned on Saturday night. That builds adversity, bloodline rules, Sunday. The deck is stacked against Cody Rhodes. He goes in on Sunday night, and he pins the tribal chief. All right, let's get back to Pro Football Focus. Top 5 wide receivers. You ready? Let's do this. Number 5 is a guy that's polarizing for some, but I love this dude. A.D. Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell from Texas. And Adonai Mitchell, he feels like he's the beginning of tier 2. Like if you were breaking down receivers in this draft, or you would say tier 3. But Adonai Mitchell is a rung or two lower than the guys that we all talk about, the top 3, which we'll get to. But Adonai Mitchell is 5. Now, he's polarizing because some people question his motor. Some question his effort at times. So there's a little bit of a wishy-washy community out there on Mitchell. There's no denying his talent. There's no denying his unbelievable athleticism. If you want to throw a fade, I was watching Mina Kimes with Nate Tice do the mock draft. You guys should check that out if you get some spare time. Mina Kimes had Nate Tice on her podcast, and they went through a mock draft. And Tice said this, and I agree with him. I watched a good amount of Mitchell at Texas. You know, Nate Tice said, I hate, we don't like fades. I hate fades in the red zone. I hate them. I hate throwing a wide receiver fade from the 5. I can't stand it. It's such a low percentage play. But if you're going to throw a fade, A.D. Mitchell's the guy to throw a fade to. I mean, he makes some great catches in traffic, high pointing the football. He's a damn good athlete. So A.D. Mitchell is 5. 4th on the list is Brian Thomas Jr. Now he's an X. He's an X receiver. He's a guy, if you're the Patriots and you're sitting at 23, you hope that Brian Thomas Jr. falls to you. He's got incredible speed. He's a big time, down the field playmaker. And he is that guy. If you're looking at the top 3 receivers that everybody's talking about, Thomas is like slightly below them, and then A.D. Mitchell is below him, if we're like putting tiers here. So Brian Thomas Jr., LSU, he was the other guy across from Neighbors. So you've got Brian Thomas Jr. He needs some refinement within his game. Then you get to the top 3. Rome Odunze is 3rd from Washington. I love Rome Odunze. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised if Rome Odunze ends up being better than the number 2 guy on this list. But Rome Odunze from Washington, he is spectacular. Number 2 is Malik Neighbors, crazy athlete, super fast. LSU, the other wide receiver for Jaden Daniels last season. And then, of course, number 1 is Marvin Harrison Jr. So the top 5 from Pro Football Focus, you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas, and Adonai Mitchell. All right. Before we get to the tackles, don't forget, give us that thumbs up, like, subscribe. Trying to hit 3,000 subscriptions by Monday. This is a push of all pushes. We're about 120 away. So give us that like and subscribe. You can get notified when we go live, all that cool stuff. Top 5 offensive tackles before we say goodbye. Number 5 is J.C. Latham from Alabama. Is he a right tackle? Is he a left tackle? He's an interesting prospect. He's at 5. Number 4 is somebody who a lot of people had. If you go back, and this is why I say there's still information being gathered. You go back 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, you go back a month ago, I think this tackle is ranked 2nd on a lot of top 5 lists. He's now 4th. That's Olu Fashanu from Penn State. He's raw. He's a big guy. He's athletic. He might have been banged up a little bit last year, which impacted some of his film. But Fashanu is 4. Then you have Troy Fautanu from Washington, who just exploded at the combine. Many people wondered if he was going to be long enough with his arms to be a tackle. His arms are long enough to be a tackle. A lot of people look at that like 33 or whatever number, 34 number. Fa'utanu proved at the combine that he has the measurables to be a tackle. So he is the third guy on this list. He's another one from Washington. Talise Fuaga from Oregon State, mauler. He is the second rated tackle according to Pro Football Focus. And of course, number one, he's been my number one since the beginning of the college season. I know a lot about this guy because I am a Notre Dame fan. It's, of course, Joe Alt. And I think Alt is a can't-miss left tackle prospect. I think Alt's floor is multiple-time Pro Bowler, as long as he stays healthy, multi-time Pro Bowler, foundational left tackle, somebody that you can believe in, somebody that you can trust for the next decade. His ceiling, Hall of Fame. He's that good. He's a giant of a man. He's a monster. Monster. Huge. And he's pretty athletic for his size. And he's still young. So the top 5 offensive tackles, you've got Joe Alt, Talise Fuaga, Troy Fa'utanu, Olu Fashanu, and J.C. Latham. That'll do it, everybody. Have yourself a great weekend. If you're a wrestling fan, enjoy WrestleMania. If you enjoy other things, enjoy those things. Have a cold beverage if you like those. I'm going to have a number of them this weekend starting today. Should be a good time. Again, my 3 priorities now as I say goodbye. Craft beer, Chinese food, WrestleMania. Everybody be awesome. Live your best life. If something breaks, we'll get to it over the weekend if it's something big. If not, I'll talk to all of you on Monday. I appreciate you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review, and check out that Patreon. Until Monday morning, see ya.